Hey everyone, it's Dielenka and welcome back to my channel. Last week we talked about 10 reasons why you should get a PhD, and today we're gonna talk about 10 reasons why you should not get a PhD. So if you haven't seen the previous one, I have linked it down below and you can watch it afterwards. And if you like my content, of course, please hit the subscribe button because it helps my channel grow and basically helps me to be appreciated for what I do. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. If you're considering getting a PhD, you might be wondering whether it is the right decision, and I was too. I was there. Maybe one thing I should mention, I did my PhD in computer science, but most of these reasons, if not all of these reasons, will be actually transferable to your field. Reason number one why you should not get a PhD is time commitment. A PhD takes a lot of time and a lot of effort to complete, usually around 3 to 5 years in Europe, but it might vary. Some people are studying for far longer than that. And why this is the thing? Well, if you really know what you're researching and you're really at home in the subject, then of course you're gonna complete your PhD and all the requirements in a shorter time. But if you're in a new topic, of course, it takes you some time to specialize in that field and to gain the required knowledge for you to actually be able to do research in that field. So it takes you a bit longer. Then again, it's all about time management too. So no one's going to be holding your hand. So if you don't push yourself into completing the PhD, then it might take you longer as well. But what I wanted to say with this point is that a lot of times your pay will be far less than what you would get if you were to go into the private sector straight away without doing a PhD, because during your PhD studies you might get a scholarship. I did get a scholarship, and that scholarship might be lower than what a full-time employment would give you. That was my case, so I also had a part-time job on the side. So make sure to find out how much you would be getting through scholarship, or if you would be getting something at all, and how you can deal with it and if that's acceptable for you. This also brings me to point number 2 why you should not get a PhD, which is the opportunity cost. Because the years you're spending researching, you could be spending in the private sector, gaining more and more experience, using the technologies and not researching them. So there becomes a gap between academia and the private sector, and then putting private sector on the top because those are the skills which are needed on the job market, and these are the skills you're needing for research and for higher salaries in the end, but you have to close that gap. And closing the gap takes years. Closing the gap requires you to finish your PhD, because if you drop it, then you won't have the title, you won't have the skills, and you are basically where you left. A lot of times going straight into the private sector also means that you are changing positions quicker, so you're rising quicker and you're getting paid more way quicker. Reason number 3 is the financial cost. I already touched this topic a bit when I said that you will be probably getting a scholarship. That's at least how it works in Europe, but maybe you won't get a scholarship. And maybe it's gonna be like in my case, where the scholarship is gonna be far less than what you would be earning in the private sector, which means that you have to ask yourself if this is worth your time, or if you can do something against this to still be earning roughly the same amount. So as I was saying, I was researching and also doing a part-time job on the side, which was really time demanding and of course also mentally demanding, because you are researching and also you're working a job which is usually very different from the area you're researching. Reason number 4, academic positions are often highly competitive and they're often saturated. Of course, fewer people have PhDs, of course, fewer positions are opening where PhDs are required, especially in academia, so it might be a little bit tough to get your job there. This is usually easier if you're staying at the university where you studied, because a lot of the times they will just want to keep you there and they will give you a position you need. Reason number 5 why you should not get a PhD: stress and pressure. You will be stressed constantly, you will be constantly pressured to fulfill some kind of requirements. In my case, I had to have a certain amount of publications in certain ranks of journals and conferences, so there was a huge pressure on publishing because, of course, your first article might not get published. It can be pushed back, and this all costs you valuable time. Then again, a lot of times you also have to secure funding for your research, and in order to get a PhD, you have to somehow contribute to the knowledge base. And this can be really stressful, and finding out what your contribution is gonna be and why your approach is different and why no one has done what you have done before. Reason number 6. If you decide to stay in the private sector after completing a PhD, a lot of recruiters will see you as simply overqualified, which can be really tough, especially in areas where research is not involved, where you will not do any research and the PhD is not mandatory, where your skills are not going to be really put to good use. So it's important to research the job market before, so you know that you're doing your PhD for a specific reason and that you will be able to get a job after completing it where you also will be using the skills, because if not, then a lot of times you're simply going to be seen as overqualified. Reason number 7. Since there are not that many jobs which require a PhD or where you would be able to work in academia generally, it might require you to move, to work internationally, to just relocate. So you have to ask yourself if you would be willing to relocate, maybe to another university, to another country, in order to get a job in the research area you want to be researching, etc. And of course, this might not be desirable for everyone. It might be difficult if you already have a family or if you already are really bound to some place. Obviously, you're going to be missing celebrations, you're going to be missing your family, you have to make new friends, you're going to be missing your old ones, etc. The start of a relocation might be really tough. Reason number 8 is the risk of specialization, because as you specialize in a certain field you're researching, you become an expert in that field. And if experts in that field are not in high demand, you might have real difficulties finding a job on the job market. So make sure you're going to be researching in a field that's a hot topic or will be a hot topic, since you certainly want to have a job after you complete your PhD. And you don't want to land in a position where your expertise is not needed, where your area is not researched in the private sector. Reason number 9 is a big one. This one is about isolation. You're going to be feeling alone all the time. Sometimes you do research in a group. I was not that lucky. I was doing research on my own, and my supervisor was a lot older than me, so I was basically just left alone and I had to stand there for myself. There was no one really supporting my work. There was no one advising me what I should or shouldn't do, which can be very isolating. Of course, I also was in contact with other PhD scholars, but they were researching another field, another area. It wasn't my area at all, so it was really limited in terms of collaboration, in terms of exchanging ideas. Of course, a lot of ideas are transferable, but a lot of them aren't. So you are just on your own with your research, and this can be mentally demanding. And of course, you can develop some kind of mental illnesses from this. And this is not something to be joked around, because a PhD is very mentally demanding. It will literally tear you apart if you're not strong enough. So I would really consider asking yourself if you're mentally prepared to get a PhD, or if you are able to get mentally prepared, and if you are mentally strong or are able to handle yourself. You need to manage your time. No one's gonna be holding your hand. You are gonna be the one who's responsible for everything. It's your choice, but I'm warning you, it's extremely mentally demanding. I even started growing gray hair when I was about to finish my PhD, and I was ill every other week. These things then, of course, naturally fix themselves, but just remember that being mentally ill or something being mentally demanding then transfers to your physical health, and you're not gonna be only mentally not well, but you're also gonna be physically unwell, and that's not something you want to experience. And finally, reason number 10 why you should not get a PhD is the delay in the financial benefits. Because as previously touched, when you go into the private sector, you're usually gonna get a pay raise pretty quickly, and with getting a PhD, you're usually just getting your scholarship. Of course, the scholarship can also be higher over time, but this usually means that there is a gap between what you would get in the private sector and what you're getting in academia. And this means that you just have to wait until you finish your PhD in order to go and get a job in the private sector, in the job market, where you can then get a higher pay according to your new acquired skills. So this basically means delaying your higher pay and waiting until you finish your PhD. But then, of course, if you find a good job where your skills are really valued, you're gonna get a higher salary immediately. So a lot of times you're able to close that gap straight away. But this is just for you to know that a PhD might not materialize immediately. That's why I highly suggest you having a look at the job market and researching an area which will be sought after. Of course, there are more and more disadvantages to getting a PhD, as there are also more benefits to getting a PhD, but these are just the 10 ones which come across my mind. So in my opinion, these are the 10 which are the most important to consider. I really hope this video was valuable, and if it was, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you want to hear more about my journey and if you want to see some cool tech. Thanks a lot for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!